Hey guys, what's going on and welcome to a brand new video. This is going to be your preview for the Manchester United versus Leeds United game, a massive game. It could be going into that game. We could be only 1 point above the relegation zone. This is being recorded before the West Ham versus Wolves game, so I don't know anything that's happened at all this weekend because, of course, that's the first game of the weekend. But we're going to get into it and talk about Leeds United versus Manchester United. This is probably the most I have to actually talk about when it comes to the press conference and injury updates, because we got a bunch of injury updates on players that don't look good, but I'm still confident in the team. I'm still happy because we got a good squad, and people were shocked to hear that sometimes, that we have actually good squad depth now, where even if you have a lot of players out, it's still possible for us to get a draw or get a win in certain games. So let's get into it and start off with what Daniel Farke had to say in the press conference. Now, in the presser, he had to say BL was struggling with a knock, so Yaka BL is struggling with a knock. No team training this week so far, so that kind of looks like he won't be available. Okafor not in team training either, so again, looks like Okafor's not going to be available with our back problems. Gabriel Goodmanson progressed after a light groin problem. All are doubts if game was tomorrow, not available. So they're all doubts if the game was tomorrow, not available, which would have been today. So if the game was today, like if we were playing when West Ham Wolves are playing, they wouldn't be available and they definitely wouldn't play. But I don't think they will be. So I don't think BL plays, and I don't think that any of these players are good and fit enough to start. In that case, anyway. So BL won't play. Goodmanson. Maybe Goodmanson's like a maybe for me that he might still start, and Okafor won't. So for me, it looks like BL won't start and Okafor won't start. Even if they are available, they'll be on the bench at best. And with you saying that about BL, basically means he won't be playing because he's, a centre-back, unless we're in a game where it's 0-0. Now, the other updates on Farke and what he had to say, Farke says it's most realistic to expect Stack and Rodon will not return until May. So it looks like Stack and Rodon are going to be out for a little bit, but the medical department is doing everything to get them back sooner, playing again in April, which would be considered a bonus. So it's looking like that we're going to have both Stack, which, how good he's been and how good of a player is, out for a while, including Joe Rodon as well, who'll be out for a while. And you just look at these injury updates, and I've seen people talk about these injuries, about that's why you don't play your full team in the cup. And I'm like, it confuses the hell out of me, because firstly, we didn't play a full team in the cup. We made some rotations. Secondly, you're looking at the squad and you're like, you don't want to go to Wembley? Or that's why you shouldn't care about the cup competitions? Well, in that case, I tweeted this out. In that case, we should never play in Europe. We should never try and make Europe, because what's the point if players can't play more than one game a week? And it's not even that. It was one game a week, because we had a week break after the cup game. So it's not even like we played midweek and then the weekend. So yeah, so it's going to be a tough game against Man United now, even more with all these players out. So yeah, as I said, as Farke said, Stack's out, Rodon's out, Dan James still hasn't returned yet, so that's another injury. And there's some question marks over BL, Goodmanson, and Okafor, but it looks like probably none of them will start. Maybe you'll see an Okafor come off the bench, and probably the only one that will come off the bench out of those three, depending on game state. Maybe if it's 0-0, you bring on a BL. But yeah, it's one of those things. But let's get into the game and get into what Daniel Farke had to say. Not Daniel Farke, the Leeds United versus Man United game, of course, at Old Trafford. So let's get into it. Let's start off with what we always do, which is the last 6 meetings against Man United. Of course, the last time we did play them was that 1-1 draw at Ellen Road this season. Before them was 2 friendlies, which were 0-0 and a 2-0 win to Man United. Before them was 3 games in the Premier League, which we lost all 3. No, we didn't. We lost 2 of them and drew 1, which was a 2-0 loss, a 2-2 draw, and a 4-2 loss. Now, going into this game, we're going to have to look at form. You got Man United all the way up in 3rd, who've been very good form, while we're all the way in 15th. Our form's okay. It's good for where we are. It's what you expect from a team fighting relegation, and a team, in the kind of upper tier of fighting relegation, the team that are in 15th. But yeah, let's get into it. So Man United in their last 6 games, they have actually won 3, drawn 2, and lost 1. So they've only lost 1 out of their last 6. And those games were a 1-1 draw with West Ham. And then after that, they beat Everton 1-0. They then went on to beat Crystal Palace 2-1. Their one loss came against Newcastle, where they lost 2-1 to Newcastle. After that, they beat Aston Villa 3-1. And then after that, they recently drew with Bournemouth 2-2. So based off form, they're in very good form. 3 wins, 2 draws, 1 loss. Good form. Meanwhile, on the other hand, you look at Leeds United and our recent form going into this game, and you got us on 2 wins, 2 draws, and 2 losses. Those losses coming both in the league to Man City and Sunderland, both 1-0. You then had the 3-0 win against Norwich in the FA Cup. You then had 2 draws, which were both 0-0 against Palace and Brentford. And then our most recent game, of course, was the win on penalties against West Ham in the Cup, which hopefully that win in the Cup does build confidence. Hopefully it does build confidence with the team, with the players, and yeah, so it's one of those things about this will be a tough game with players out. Now, when Fark makes all these statements and said, oh, this player's struggling and this player might not make it, I think there'll be 1 or 2 that will make it. So basically, that's how I'm going to do my lineup based off who I think is going to be available. So we're going to start off with goalkeeper. I think Carl Dallo comes in goal. I think he's the Premier League goalkeeper for us. I like Perry in the last game against West Ham. I thought he was very good. Of course, he had that one moment in extra time where he had a brain explosion, but luckily they were offside. But besides that, I thought he was very good. And there is a goalkeeper in there, but I think Darlow hasn't really made a mistake for him to come out. He hasn't really had a bad game where you're like, it's not really a question at the moment, unless Darlow has a poor game. I think Darlow keeps his spot for the rest of the season. You then got the back 3 in front of them, which you're going to have to talk about this. So you got Rodon, who won't be available. You got Biol, who is in contention of maybe not making it. So what I think we're actually going to do in the back 3 is you're going to have Bornau, Strauch, and Ampadu. I think we're going to have to put Ampadu at centre-back. If this is, of course, if Biol can't make it and can't start in this game, I think Ampadu's going to go centre-back, and you're going to have a back 3 of Biol, Ampadu. Not Biol, Bornau, Ampadu, and Strauch, and that's going to be your back 3. That's how I think we'll line up. Then you're going to have your wing backs. I think it's going to be Bogle and James Justin, and I'm fine with that. James Justin's been a good player this season when called upon, and yeah, if Goodmanson is out and it has to be James Justin, I'm fine with that. Then you get into the midfield, and it's kind of tricky because you don't really know what we're going to do in this midfield. Now, I think you're going to have the midfield 3, of course. I think you're going to have Gruev playing the Ampadu role. So you're going to have Gruev in there because you're going to have someone playing that Ampadu role, and I think that's going to be Ilya Gruev. And the last time Ampadu wasn't available, Gruev had an absolute brilliant performance against against Liverpool. If you remember the last time that Ampadu wasn't available, it was that brilliant performance that Gruev had against Liverpool. So hopefully he can have a similar performance if Ampadu has to go to centre-back and, he has to play in that Ampadu role, which I'm fine with because I think Gruev can do that job. Not to the level of Ampadu because I don't think he's as good going forward, but the defensive work that he does is on the same level, if not, in my opinion, a bit better than Ampadu's because I think defensively he's such an underrated footballer in that midfield. And I think he's going to basically play the Ampadu role. He's going to be the deep player, which I think suits him more because he's better defensively. So when you have him further back in that defensive role, in that CDM role, I think that's where you see the best out of Ilya Gruev, which it's hard when you have Ampadu in the team to put a Gruev there. But with Ampadu having to move to centre-back, if, of course, Biol can't start, you're going to have Gruev play that Ampadu role. You're then going to have the 2 midfielders next to him, so the 2 8s, which I think we're going to go with is Brendan Aronson and Ao Tanaka. Of course, you have some players out, so you're going to have to wonder who's going to play where, but I think Aronson sticks there and Tanaka, because I think both of them in the midfield, I think work together as well. Like, they can work together in that midfield. Both can press well. Tanaka showed what he can. Like, he's a good player on the ball. You got Aronson on the ball, technically decent as well. And I think both of them working together and the pressing that they can do as well, I think is a good midfield 3 if this is what we have to do. I think that's a good midfield 3 of Tanaka, Aronson, Gruev. And having Aronson and Tanaka doing, of course, the pressing and all the attacking work, and you have Gruev who's sitting back and doing the defensive work to a good level. So I think that's a good midfield 3 to have. And then the front 2, I think we're going to go with DCL and Lucas Mecha. I think we're going to stick with the two of Lucas Mecha and DCL, with, of course, Okafor not being available for this game. If he is, he'll probably only be on the bench. So that's how I think we're going to line up in this game. And hey, even looking at that lineup and looking at the players that are going to come in, Gruev, when called upon, has been good this season. Despite what you want to hear from people on Twitter and what people want to say on Twitter, he's had a good season. Bornau, when called upon, he had that, start of the season, we were a bit worried about him. But when called upon recently in the Premier League, when he has been called upon, really since, that December when he was called upon against Liverpool. I mean, he was on the pitch against Liverpool. Those kind of games around there, the December, January area where we had to rely on a Bornau. He's come in and done a job. So I back Bornau in that defensive role as well. James Justin, we backed this season and done well. So the players that aren't starters but have to come in when we do have injuries, I back. and I'm looking at this team, and I'm still confident that we can get at least a point against Man United. Of course, I'm going to back a win. Of course, I'm going to back a win and say we're going to win this game. I'm going to go with a 2-1 Leeds United win. Goal scorers being, I think Aronson gets a goal. You know, bit of confidence off the back of one of the players that scored a penalty and, of course, winning the penalty that DCL scored. So I think Aronson gets a goal in this game, and I'm going to say Lucas Mecha. I think Mecha and Aronson both score in this game. We win this game 2-1. I think it's going to be a hard game as well. Like, I'm going to back us, but I do think it's going to be a difficult game because Man United are playing very well. You know, you got to look out for like a player like Bruno Fernandes, who's been brilliant this season. You know, when he's actually played in his proper position. But yeah, I think it's going to be a tough game against Man United. I'm hoping for a win. As I said, I would take a draw though, because they are a tough team. And if we do lose, I'm not going to lose my head. Even if the other results go against us and we are 1 point off the drop, I'm not going to lose my head if we draw this game. If we lose this game, because it's probably what I expect the most when I'm looking at form and how good each team have been. You know, this is what you're probably expecting, a loss. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Hopefully we can win. Hopefully some of the players that, you know, Farkas said might not be available are actually available. But even if they're not, I'm fine with the players that come in. I'm fine with the players that, you know, come in and play. And then, yeah, I'm happy with having like an Okafor off the bench, you know, for a match in like the 60th, 70th minute. And yeah, I'm liking this team. As I said, I like the depth that we have in each position. Our best depth is, of course, in the midfield, in my opinion. And not having Stack, yes, is probably more of a massive miss. But, you know, the players that we can bring into the team, like a Tanaka, and the midfield's, you know, the midfield's fine if we have to have Grove and Aronson and Tanaka as the midfield three, and I'm fine with that. Grove's also a decent set-piece taker. Like, people say he's poor. I don't think he's poor. I think he's a good set-piece taker. Not at the same level as Stack, but I think he's a good set-piece taker who could take a good free kick, and hopefully we see that. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments down below. As I said a couple of times already, make sure you like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.